Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the AXR Sales Director Incubator, a program that helps you make great career decisions. My name is Mike Dixon. I lead the sales and practice here at AXR Recruitment Research, and today's guest is Hanna. Hanna is the Sales Director for Unilever's food and refreshment business. And like me, Hannah's a Brit who made her home here in Sydney. She's 6 years or so into her career at Unilever. Her pathway started as a grad in analytics before working across category and customer roles with Nestle, L'Oreal, and Mars. So welcome, Hanna. Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. I can't believe we're finally here because I just mentioned a second ago, you asked me to do this, I think, in January, and I picked the date that was furthest away in the hope that, I don't know, maybe I died by the time it got to this date. And now we're here and it's November, and that's just really scary.
It is. I do remember having the conversation and thinking, you've either got an incredibly busy diary that you can't make it until November, or you want to do this, but you're kind of not sure at the same time. So it's great to have you on anyway. So fantastic. Now, in terms of getting into today's session, Hanna, one of the things I'd love to kind of get a sense of, now you're also a sales director. We're going to talk about your career and how you've got there, what you do, what your role is like. But if you weren't a sales director, is there any kind of other, I don't know, childhood dream job you might have had, or anything else you did?
If I was a sales director, I think first up, probably be significantly more chilled. But apart from that, I always wanted to be a hairdresser. In fact, my parents told me that I was too tall to be a hairdresser. So I think that was just, I don't know, maybe they had bigger aspirations for me. I think what I would really do is be an author. I have like crazy dreams of Colin Firth's scene in Love Actually, where he's writing by the lake in France. That just looks crazily idyllic to me. And a cool idea for a book I want to, that's my retirement plan. So have to keep that one in the bag. But I am dating a French person, so I'm keeping the dream alive now that Brexit's happened. I'll still be able to get a French passport and move to France. So,
fantastic. Awesome. And another question, which I'm really interested in your answer for this. I've asked this to maybe 2 or 3 people, and I just love the kind of variety of answers we get. But if there's one thing you could change about society, Hanna, you know, what would it be? What are you going to do?
Yeah, no, so I am a bit nervous about the answer to this question because I think it may make me sound a little bit like I'm a contestant in Miss World, but I would love to change society's view on climate change. If you want to see how passionate I am about this, just go on to Scott Morrison's Instagram page, where I'm a regular messenger, I guess, on the post that he puts. But I definitely feel passionate about the fact that in Australia we have an amazing environment around us and mix of fauna and flora that we really need to protect. And I do feel like there's a lot more that we can do. I do search through my neighbours' bins and resort this recycling. I have been known to pick rubbish out of the work bins and take it back to the person who ate that thing for lunch and ask them to go and put it back in the correct bin. I had a bit of a big debate around with my boss this week around plastic versus paper and the costs on ice cream wrappers. So yeah, definitely keen to continue to beat the drum around climate change and what we can do to improve our attitudes.
Outstanding. We are kindred spirits. I'm with you. I'm with you 100% on that. I'm a bin sorter as well. It's one of those weird things.
I had to educate my neighbours that you cannot put plastic bags into the recycling bin. You need to empty the rubbish.
Correct. We've got a way to go in Australia, haven't we? We live in the most amazing country, but we're not the most progressive thinkers around environment and climate change. So sure, we'll get there. People like you and I keep pushing and trying, Hanna. I'm going to check out Scott Morrison's Instagram and Twitter account just for kind of Fold's contributions.
Yeah,
Fantastic. So we talked about obviously what you would do if you're not a sales director, but from a career point of view, was there another pathway for you? Was it always going to be sales? Did you think of other things you could have done?
So I think probably blindly when I finished university, I thought that the area that probably suited me best would be marketing. But I was passionate about FMCG. I had done an internship when I finished school in an FMCG company. And I thought about it and thought about the people who were also on my course at university and the number of people who were applying to the marketing streams, that I thought a way of getting in potentially, which would potentially be easier, would be if I applied for the sales streams. So I applied for the sales streams at all the big FMCG companies thinking, oh, there's going to be less people wanting to do sales than marketing. And I got interviews at Mars, Unilever, Nestle, Kimberly-Clark, didn't get any of the jobs. So I love to talk about that because actually I got rejected from all the companies that I've then gone on to work for. So I definitely think that if you don't get on the grad scheme, there is other ways around it. I then, as you talked about, got onto the grad scheme at Taylor Nelson Softwares as it was back in the day, now Kantar Panel. And actually that was brilliant for me because I had 2 years working for a company that basically taught me all the basics around data. And finally, the world is waking up to how important data is. And I'll be honest, my team around me actually probably don't use the data resources on the whole that we have to the optimum. And I do strongly believe that probably my history of understanding and working with data and how you can manipulate it probably has got me to where I am, because so many times data has been what's got a deal over the table with the retailers. So it probably wasn't what I thought I wanted to do at the time, but it gave me the ability to work across a number of the key FMCG companies. It got me the category role at Nestle, and it set me up to understand panel data particularly and how it works. And also got me really good at Excel, which was probably quite useful because we weren't using it a lot back in the day at university, etc. And yeah, I think it was, looking back, I definitely recommend a stint in what we call CMI at Unilever, or the data parts of businesses, because it's definitely the future.
Do you think that there's a perception out there about sales, for those who are not in sales, for example, that it's not necessarily a go-to function? Do you think the reality of what we do in a sales and modern sales role is different from I guess the view of those who are perhaps considering a career path in the early stages of what they want to do?
I definitely think there's probably a misunderstanding about exactly what sales is until you've actually had a go at it. I remember when I'd been working for maybe 3 years at L'Oreal, my mum asked me, managing hair care on Tesco, my mum asked me if I wanted to bring some products to a coffee morning she was having to sell. So clearly there's some kind of gap in people's understanding of what we actually do. I think that the role has changed a lot. So even in the time that I've been doing it, I think it's gone from being relationships and I guess communication to really being a lot more scientific. I think people probably underestimate the influencing. I think people think that when you work on Wolves and Coles, that's a really challenging role. But I actually feel like for me, it's the influencing internally and actually how well you can do that actually then opens up what you can do with the retailers. I think that like you to be in sales. I don't necessarily think that's my strength. And if I went to being account manager now, whether or not I could keep up with the level of disciplines that you have now, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think it is quite different. It's definitely not the wheeler dealer that I think some people think it is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we have a challenge potentially in terms of attracting people into sales. We've got severe talent shortages at the moment, as most professions have in Australia. But that's in sales and particularly in FMCG consumer world, that's been the case for a little while now, for a few years. And I think part of that is actually just we're not attracting enough people in. The perception versus the reality of the role different, and what we're looking for is, smart people with diverse skill sets, and it's not just a big personality anymore that wins in sales. In fact, probably doesn't win anymore. It's the analyst. It's somebody who's able to kind of bring rational thinking and to influence stakeholders, as you talked about. So it's changed a lot, but we'll come back to that.
One thing I mentioned yesterday to you when we talked on the phone, and one thing that I'm really not seeing in candidates at the moment is that hunger, that like ruthless desire to succeed. I know it sounds so funny, but I told my boss recently that the person I was looking for had the personality of like the Artful Dodger. And that's the kind of like, it's not experience that you necessarily need. It's when you're hungry, you'll find your food kind of like energy. And that's what I love. That's the kind of people that I love to have around me. Yeah.
And if you've got that's the kind of personality kind of, it's almost like competitive instinct. It's street smarts, commercial thinking, all those things, and layered onto, because you can't just be the analyst and win in sales. You've got to have a bit of commercial acumen, which comes from that ability to kind of weigh up and make quick decisions on what you want to do, but this kind of drive to go after something as well. So.
Yeah, and finding like the back route when the first route didn't work.
Yeah. Was there a role, or has there been a kind of a role you've gone for, a promotion that you've had that you look back and think, oh, that was fantastic. That's the one that's made me most proud?
I think I probably have a couple of answers to this question. I think the first probably answer was when I got the job at L'Oreal. So L'Oreal is based in central London. It has an amazing lobby with chairs which are so low, I probably couldn't get out of it when the person came to collect me for the interview. Definitely the interview, they threw some maths questions at me, which I haven't had since, or I hadn't had prior to that. It was definitely intimidating, but exciting. And I feel like I was like the northern girl who'd come into this like Devil Wears Prada office. So I definitely felt pretty excited when I got that job. And then I'd probably say the role I have now. I think when you're an account manager, you never really let yourself get carried away with thinking maybe I'll be a sales director, or I never did. It felt so unattainable. But I feel so lucky with what I do now, having the mix of accounts. You can have a bad day with one account and an amazing day with another account, and it always seems to balance out. I have such a mix of people beneath me who, in the team, who have such a mix of personalities and ways of working, and definitely inspire me and change the way that I'm thinking around deals or decisions that we're making. I also feel like you have such a luxury when you get to a sales director that you get to sit on the board and really understand why the decisions are being made. It definitely makes you toe the corporate line a bit more when you understand all the different pressures, but it's also kind of puts all the pieces together and definitely makes your understanding a lot more rounded, I think.
Yeah. Is there a role that, when you look back as to your career thus far, and we'll talk about what you do next in a second, Hannah, but is there a role that you think, I'm so glad I did that? Without that's a role that I fall back on, or without it, the skills or experience I had in that role, I don't think I'd be as effective as a sales director as I am now.
Yeah, probably, I'm trying not to ramble too much, but probably like three that come to mind. So the first would be, I took a year out between school and university, and it sounds ridiculously unglamorous, but I set up the bakery in Marks and Spencer's in Leeds. So that just gave me an amazing experience of working in a retailer. it gave me the understanding of how on a Tuesday you used to get a surge in sales because people used to get their benefits or pensions. It gave me an understanding of the intricacies of retail, of SRP packaging, of filling shelves, of moving things from the freezer to from the freezer storage to a freezer, which is so useful when I try and understand the job now and the final mile. So that's the first one I would say. It was probably also my first experience of working in a big corporate. Still have about £30 of Marks and Spencer shares. I think the second one was probably when I was at Nestle. I was given an amazing opportunity, which was to work in Tesco head office for a year. So I did a year working in category at Nestle in York, and then a year working with the confectionery buyer at Tesco. So she was actually an Aussie at the time, a lady called Sharon Segal, but I don't think she's in the industry anymore. But I literally sat at her desk, and she had all of the NAMs from all of the different confectionery companies come and present at her desk. And at the time, I hadn't been a NAM, but it gave me the ability to see such a plethora of different NAMs and the way that they work, and the different ways that they presented themselves. And I think that's definitely what drove me into wanting to be an account manager. But I also think it gave me a real understanding of what made a good account manager and what didn't. And I remember at the time, in the UK at the time, Wrigley account managers were just amazing. So that was definitely what I took my inspiration from. But it taught me things like how busy a buyer is, how important it is to communicate, how important it is to have all of your new line forms and product samples on time. And it definitely built my understanding around that. And then I'd probably say the role at L'Oreal. So L'Oreal gave me a massive kick up the arse, to be honest. I came from being probably a high performer at Nestle to going into a new function in terms of pure account management when I joined L'Oreal. And the competitive set that I joined was exceptional. If you look across the board now at the people who are in my team, they're all kicking goals with amazing roles. So I was surrounded by suddenly a competitive set, and I had to drag my behaviours and ability up hugely in that role to be able to compete. And that's probably was my biggest learning curve, but also probably what set me up to be a good account manager going forward.
Yeah, great. I'm starting to kind of, I guess, move to where you are now and looking forward. Now you're in your role because you've done well. You have dragged your behaviours up, as you said. I'm sure you're more efficient than that. But you've been surrounded by good people, and you've raised your game, and you've also you've also clearly worked on your skills and refined how you do things. Now, as a sales director, what do you continue to work on? What are the things? Because I guess people looking at sales directors kind of think, well, you've got it, haven't you? You're the real deal, the full package. Just everything you do seems right. But what do you continue to work on?
I think probably the biggest one for me is actually not jumping to an answer. I think I have been an account manager now for nearly around 15 years, 16 years. And when the team come with a question, it's easy for me to have an opinion straight away, but it's not helping them, for me, to race to an answer. And also, the market that we're working in is always changing. So if I'm jumping to the answer straight away, that's not necessarily the right answer anymore. So I think for me, my biggest development area, and what will really develop the team around me as well, is to turn around their questions and actually push them to actually seek the answer themselves and basically come back to me with what they think. There's been a few times over the last few years when I've had a very strong opinion and the team have had a different idea, and actually their idea or their decision that they wanted to make was definitely the right decision. And had I have gone with my idea, then probably the outcome wouldn't have been as good. So I think it's as more experience and hindsight you get rigid ideas in your head, and it's trying to make sure that you're still open to listening and changing your mind.
Yeah.
That's probably my biggest development area. Still working on it.
Yeah. Oh, and I think we all have those kind of strengths we bring as individuals, as leaders, and we all have things we're not naturally as good at. I think it's not so much you can completely get rid of those, but if you know them, then you work with them, and you kind of catch yourself stopping your weaknesses having a big impact. So you try and mitigate the impact of those. But now another thing I want to talk about too is still in your career, Hannah, is what next. Again, for those who are on the call or listening to the podcast, who are thinking, well, my only goal is being a sales director, but you're now a sales director. So do you? There are, and you've got a lot of runway ahead of you. That's it. Your career's not stopped. You've got lots of things I'm sure you want to go on and do. For you, what does the future look like? What does that future pathway appear like to you?
So it's funny you say that, because sales is my passion. Sales is what I really love. And actually, I talk to senior leaders in Unilever about what might be next. For me, I'm not passionate about supply. I'm not passionate particularly about HR, finance. For me, I want to stay in sales. So I am pushing for a sales director role in a developing market, because I would love to experience sales globally and learn some different skill sets around working in different environments. So actually, I still want to be a sales director. That's what I love. So, yeah.
So
for me at the moment, that's fine.
That's an interesting point, because it's again, there's often an assumption that, well, once you've reached it, that's it. But there's so many different types of sales director roles. I'll give you examples. I'm recruiting for a sales director role now for a medical company, and I'm talking to sales directors in other companies, kind of saying, because they're open to people from a non-medical background. But it's really interesting, because it's actually, it will test that sales director capability in a completely different world, really developing them, and as opposed to kind of saying, well, every sales director role is the same. It's not, because the situation, environment, the dynamics of business, structural size, geography, sector, market are always different. And you can continue to evolve and think and learn because of those variables.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't considered pharmaceuticals. I think, given the rising raw material costs at the moment and the complexities with supply chain, pharmaceuticals has got to be where it's at, right?
Yeah. I'll call you later. Cool. What about career advice? Now, I want to ask this in a couple of different ways. So, have you got a piece of career advice you've had that you hang on to and think, oh, that was great? I keep coming back to that. And then I want to also, if you think about what you're answering that one, is if someone comes to you, do you give a fairly consistent answer on career advice, or does it differ and vary depending on the person who's asking for advice?
Look, the piece of career advice that definitely has stuck in my head more than any other came from Pete Marshall, who used to be one of the sales directors at Mars when I first moved to Australia. We were in a development chat, and I was talking about what I believed were my development areas and things that I needed to focus on. And he pretty much said, tell you what, don't focus on the stuff that you're not good at. Focus on the things that you can do well, that you think are your like magic qualities, and actually double down on those. And that's a piece of advice that I've given to lots of people since then, because I really strongly believe that if you focus on the things that you're not so good at, you'll become average at everything. Mm. You're giving so much focus on something that you might never be great at. I'll never be great at attention to detail. That's not me. But I make sure that I've got people around me in my team who are good at attention to detail. And they pull me up when I've got a crazy idea with why it probably won't work. And that's great. But if I went away and just focused on making every P&L I've ever done 100% right and making sure that I tick off everything on my to-do list, actually the big ideas and the strategy and the relationship building, which I find energizing and I think I'm quite good at, actually would go out the window because I'd be too busy with my Excel sheets. So what I would say is you're never going to be great at everything. None of us are. Pick the things that you're good at, be amazing at them, and make that your personal brand and what you're about. I think that's a pretty cool piece of advice. I definitely give different people different advice. Yes. I have all sorts in my team, all sorts of different personalities in my team. I've got some people who need a lot of confidence building. I've got some people who maybe just don't really need that much advice at all, just need like to know that I'm there. I think I've got some people who just love a chat, and that's fine. Yeah, definitely differ in terms of the pieces of advice that I give.
Right. I want to get your advice now on interview. Now, I do a lot of interviewing naturally in my role. You do a lot in your role, and we've probably seen people perform brilliantly and people not perform so well. But it's the sort of thing that, you know, whilst I do it every day, and typically people only, you know, move companies now and again, so they don't interview that often. And so I spend a lot of time coaching people, helping them understand how to prepare and perform in an interview. When an interview goes well for you, why does it go well in terms of, and when it doesn't go well, why doesn't it go well?
So for me, I ask that you turn up looking like you want the job. So just brush your hair, wear a nice top. You can be like me right now and be wearing your trainers and like your gym leggings underneath your top. Just look like you wouldn't turn up for a date looking like you've got out of bed. So don't turn up for an interview. Also, do a bit of research about the company that you're going for and the brands. And if they've been in the news, maybe look at the share price. I remember the day that I went for my L'Oreal interview was the day that L'Oreal bought the Body Shop. And I'm so happy that I'd read all about it when I went into that interview. There's so many times when you ask what people's favorite Unilever brand is and why, and they literally don't know any of the brands. And you're just like, why do you even want the job? So that would be the first piece of advice. And honestly, if you do that, then at least I know that you want the job and you're passionate about it. So you're probably 30% of the way there. I think I've told you this story before, but I once interviewed someone on the grad scheme for L'Oreal with nail varnish halfway down their nails. And it seems ridiculous, but it would have taken them 30 seconds. You come into a cosmetics company, just get your stuff sorted. And also, I think that tells you also that the person's self-aware, and that's something that you're looking for when you talk about development with them in the future. Secondly, I love to hear passion. So if you can sell yourself and what you've done so far in your career, even if you've had a really limited career, what you've done at school or what you've done in sports teams, at least if you can sell yourself, then you can go and sell a dodgy product if I one day ask you to do that. I think, secondly, most interviews have a similar structure in terms of what I'm going to be asking for you. A project you've worked on where you've had to influence, or a big launch that you're really proud of, or a negotiation that you've had to do. So prepare some answers in your head, because most of those answers can be used across multiple questions. I think I have interviewed a lot recently. You're right in saying that there is a massive gap in terms of talent, particularly at a junior NAM level. I've interviewed lots of people, and what I find super frustrating is one-word answers or very, very brief responses. Because I'm finding myself then that I'm constantly asking, okay, that's interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Okay, cool. What were the results? The other alternative to that, which you and I have also spoken about, is very, very, very long rambling answers. And you're like, almost to the extent where they've forgotten what the question is. So keep it like to the point, which is probably something I also need to work on. So I still hear me.
Yeah, so you briefly frozen, but we've got you back. That's okay.
Yeah, I think I want to feel passionate about you joining the team.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking for.
Good. Yeah, I think your point on getting the balance right between being too succinct and too rambly is the biggest challenge. I mean, there's lots of things you've got to get right in an interview, but you know, perhaps one piece of advice I'd add on in terms of how practically to do that. You know, everybody should have a kind of backpack of examples. You know, you don't need many. You only need 6 or so.
Yeah.
of things that you've done that you feel comfortable with, that you can tell a story about. Because interviews about storytelling, people remember stories. And if you stick to the structure of the story, then you will give enough detail without losing your way. So I always use an analogy. People talk about STAR as one format. To me, it's an even easier one, which is CAR: context, action, result. Talk about the context, which is what was going on around you. Actions, what 3 things did you do? What were the top 3 things you need to do to react to the opportunity or the problem? And what was the result or impact? And if you can layer that back up to the business objective, then it's even better. But that keeps you kind of delivering an answer of probably 3 minutes. So it's enough detail without rambling, and you've given a story which the interview is going to remember, as opposed to some generic nonsense or one-word answer, which is too little and leaves the interviewer kind of going, "There's nothing here." So it's tough to get that balance right.
I also think what's quite cool is if they can self-reflect as well and say, actually, I was really proud of what I did and this was the result. If I did it again, maybe I would also do this, which would improve the result even more. Something like that. So they're actually self-aware and they're thinking it through. I also think it's always good to have a couple of questions in an interview.
Yeah.
That awkward silence.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
So if you've written down context, action, result, add L to that, Carl. Context, action, result, learning. It's on questions. I think that's a really good one. Because questions is around showing knowledge, but also your smarts and your commercial acumen. But it also helps you understand. You've got somebody in front of you who's potentially a future leader, or certainly in the business you're considering joining. So find out about that business. Use the person in front of you. It's about you finding out about them as much as it is them, assessing you. What questions do you think are good ones to ask? Have you heard a question before and thought that's a great question? I think that's really demonstrated, capability or smarts from that candidate.
If you're interviewing with the person who could be your line manager, I think asking them about them leadership skills and how they keep the team motivated is also always an interesting question. And I've definitely been asked that before. I think something that Mars did really well when I was doing the recruitment process with them is that they connected me with other people who were currently doing similar roles within the business for me to have a conversation with, actually like what would be my peer set. And I felt like that was a really nice way of actually really understanding the business and in a more candid conversation versus actually being tested. I also think it's interesting to find out a company's, I guess we call them at Unilever, standards of leadership, but what the behaviours that the company actually believe are the behaviours that they would want to see their associates demonstrating, which I've definitely been asked before in an interview as well. I think like I like being tested because actually at the end of an interview with some really good hard-hitting questions, because that actually gets you into more of a conversation. And at the end of the day, what you really want to come out of the interview is actually that rapport, that connection that you've made. So I think you can be like quite like challenging. You can be asking what like the biggest hurdle is that the business is trying to overcome at the moment, or what the thing that the person interviewing you is most proud about that they've delivered this year. And that will actually start to open up a conversation. And actually then you can really think, okay, is this person inspiring? Do I want to work for this person? And actually that'll help make the decision. So many times when I've actually never left a job or a company hating that job or company. So I've never found making the decision to move to a different company easy. So the more that you can find out, that will make the decision easier for you to understand whether or not you want to make the jump and go to a different company. Completely.
I think it's a great opportunity to raise the conversation. And if there's nothing worse than you get to the end and the candidate feels they're almost paying you a compliment by saying, "Oh, you've been great. You've answered all my questions." I'm like, really? This is your chance to shine. Show me what you've got. Hit me with some real big questions. And my advice is don't shy away from challenging the interviewer. Actually, the interviewer 99 times out of 100 will want to be challenged. So don't keep it bland. Don't be safe. Be bold and be challenging.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a question, something like, why is your brand on the bottom shelf? So that would be brilliant.
Exactly. That shows a lot of smarts. I've been out, had a look. I've got a view, but what's your view? But why?
I interviewed somebody the other day, and they brought props of different customer activations that they'd done. I loved it. The passion.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, being different. A question from the chat, Hannah, from Daniel Roberts. Said, "Hi Hannah, great share. I've been fortunate enough to work with Unilever CEO Nikki Sparshot, and now and how strong she is at balance. In a role like yours, it requires so much energy. How do you keep the cup full?"
Sorry, what was the?
How do you keep the cup full?
I feel like I am good at this, but I'm not entirely sure why. For me, I think if you're passionate about what you do as a job, the cup is endlessly full. I think I definitely have lulls throughout the year. And I think if you've been at 100 miles an hour and you've had like a really big half that you've been trying to hit, or a really big target, you can feel afterwards like, I definitely ask myself, and this might sound a bit crazy, if there was an Olympic medal for my job, would I be giving myself an Olympic medal, or am I being a bit average? I also ask myself, did I earn my salary today? Quite often. For me, I think planning ahead and thinking about what you want to be famous for in the next quarter, the next half, the next year, definitely energizes and focuses me. I think balancing, making sure that when I look at my calendar, first of all, I hate the word busy. So I can pretty much guarantee that if you're ruthless with your calendar, you can get rid of at least probably a day a week's worth of meetings. So I definitely think if you're feeling overwhelmed and busy, you need to go through your calendar. And if you've got meetings that are all an hour, do they need to be an hour? Could they be 45 minutes? Like, definitely challenge how you're spending your time. I think during the last 2 years, like, how many times have we literally sat in front of our computer for the whole day? Some days I haven't even been to the bathroom. Literally, you don't need to be busy. Like Unilever and New Zealand are currently working a 4-day week, and it's hugely successful. So you can do your job more smartly in less time. So and then I think if you free up time, you can actually make hours to do what energizes you and keeps you excited about your job. For me, it sounds crazy, but sometimes it's just going in Quantium and running data and actually understanding what's going on in the category and finding some real nuggets of information and actually going back and being able to challenge the team. I find that quite fun, bizarre. Other people, it might be planning big activations that they want to do next year. The retailers, it might be just giving your retailer a chat and having a conversation about how sales are. It might be for some people that they love the people management parts or the team parts. So it might be asking if they can be part of a team meeting that's coming up and preparing some slides for that, or it might just be having a whip with someone in their team. I think the other thing which Nikki is really good at and Unilever is very good at is actually getting people involved in different causes across the organization. So things like Indigenous Day, or we have a real push around at the moment for really understanding whether our products are suited for everybody, and bringing in people from different backgrounds and potentially people who may have disabilities, etc., and really understanding how they use our products and also fit within our fit in the organization. So if you get passion from areas like that or the environment, etc., there's definitely businesses would love you to like pick up projects in those areas, I believe. So that is also a great energizer.
Great answer. And clearly, the environment is one of your passionate areas. On the diversity piece, we talked before about the I guess the perception of sales perhaps lags the reality of the fact it's quite a diverse function. There's lots of things you've got to be good at. As a function, do we have enough diversity in it in terms of the people?
If you go to a Woolworths, I think you'd probably say no, because I reckon about still 75% of the people are probably male between 30 and 50, white males. But I do think Australia is moving in the right direction. I am incredibly lucky in my team to have a 72-year-old lady who's been in her role for 35 years, which blows my mind because that's my parents' age and my mum can barely use a mobile. I love talking to her. She definitely energizes me with stories about the Sydney Olympics and experiences that I'll never get to have. And I also am a huge believer in giving young people a chance. So one of the top performers in my team at the moment is an intern. She's also called Hanna, so might feel a connection through her name. But she has come in and she's performing at where I would expect to see a NAM perform and really rattling the cages within my team and challenging others. I think giving young people with little to no experience a chance is something that I'm a really big believer in. I think I've got so many historic examples of when young people have really over-delivered and done some pretty amazing things. And I love that naive kind of like vision that young people have where there are no hurdles and it's a perfect world. And I remember when I was at Nestle, I definitely had that. And I can remember at the time, a girl called Bex, who I worked with, said, never lose that because that's what makes you special. And I'm sure now I've like been knocked down so many times, but I do try and keep that like fresh, like maybe we can just give it a chance kind of attitude. And that's really cool to see with young people. I think generally the UK is much more further forward in terms of female and male balance in account management. And I think that we'll get there, and we are getting there in Australia, but it definitely takes away from the old school kind of, you're my mate, let's do a deal. But at the end of the day, nobody's making decisions like that anymore anyway. You need the data to be able to land the best results. So do I think we need more diversity? Yes. Do I think we're moving in the right direction? Yes. I feel really lucky to work at Unilever because I feel like it's been on their agenda for a long time and we're probably ahead of some of the other businesses out there.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely moving in the right direction. I think even the last couple of years it's accelerated in terms of knowledge, understanding. I keep a really close eye on the gender mix in particular. And I know there's many other ways to look at diversity, but gender is one we're probably most focused on. And so I measure my short list, my long list, and I always give a gender balance. And it's interesting, actually. I'm just thinking back as I'm talking. The last 3 national account manager roles I've placed have all been female. If I think of, I've always got a crop of half a dozen, people in each role pool that I think they're my superstars. They're the people I want to go to that I really believe in. And if I think about my national account manager crop just now, I've got about half a dozen. I think 4 out of the 6 are female just now, because they've got that diverse mindset and skills, that skill set, which is really good. And that's not me deliberately picking females. It's just the way it's landing at the moment, which is, I don't think I would have said that 3 years ago. So it's definitely shifting in the right direction. So, Hanna, we are out of time. That's just gone 8:45. So thank you very much for sharing today your journey, your passions, and the energy that you've got is infectious. It's absolutely superb. So I really woke me up this morning, which is wonderful. As a reminder, everybody, today's session will be in the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing. It'll land next Thursday. You'll be able to listen to Hanna and I in repeat. If you don't already, download and subscribe to your favorite podcast provider. We're anywhere, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anything else you like, we're on it. The next live session is our penultimate of 2021. We've got Ollie Tatlow, who's the MD of Beckett, on December Second, I believe you know Ollie, Hanna, and then we've also got somebody else. We've got we wrap up the year a week later with FMCGer turned Googler, Robbie Lawson. So another person from your past, I think, Hanna. So
it's a small industry. That's probably a good piece of advice. Don't burn your bridges. Correct.
So thank you again, Hanna, and talk to everybody again soon as we share some more amazing insights. But Hanna, you've been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike.